Thank you for joining us today, everyone. I'm Dr. Owen Powell, lecturer in Human Resource Management in the York Business School at York St John University. I've been asked to host this webinar as part of the Alumni series, Alumni Journeys, Creativity, Careers and Community. Before I introduce today's speaker, there's a couple of housekeeping matters to address. Firstly, we'll be hosting a Q&A at the end of this talk. The questions have been prepared in advance, but if you have any questions for today's speaker, please email alumni@yorksj.ac.uk and the team will pass on your questions. There will be an auto transcript appearing as part of the talk when it's published online for increased accessibility. However, please do be aware these are not always perfectly transcribed. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Chris Rulton. Chris graduated from York St John in 2004 with a degree in sport and exercise science. After graduating, Chris worked in a range of customer service roles and administrative positions. In 2011, Chris worked for Inclusion Housing York as a business administration officer and progressed on to being a business analyst. Chris now works for Family Fund York as the head of group governance, risk and compliance. Under Chris's management, one of his teams won Small Compliance Team of the Year at the International Compliance Association's Compliance Awards 2025. I'd like to now pass over to Chris, and I look forward to chatting later.
Hi there, thank you, Owen. So I'm going to talk through my career path and the winding road that led me to the world of compliance and data protection and my work in the charity sector. It's more of a stumbling into place story and finding your path in your 30s than one of the stories where it's you knew what you wanted to do from when you were young. There may have been a slight indicator, though, being an 80s child to nerdy parents. I was brought up on Star Trek and Doctor Who, and I think that's led to a lot of my personal morality and worldview, and I think that's expressed in my charity work. So I was, when I was young, it was undiagnosed autism, social phobia, and lifelong depression. And the way that worked in my mind meant that GCSEs were a bit like a pub quiz to me. I never learnt the skill of revision. So when I was taking my levels and looking to university, York St John was my first choice. On the day I did my visits, it was a beautiful sunny day. The views looked spectacular. The sites all looked beautiful. Easy first choice. But not knowing how to revise, I didn't do well at my A-levels. So in the clearing process, I ended up, there's a scheme where you could go to York College for the first 2 years of your degree and then skip straight into the third year at York St John. So that's the path I took. So I have a HND in Sports and Exercise Science from York College and then my degree from York St John. I still struggled during that period with isolation, with there's a thing called toxic independence, where when you're brought up thinking that you should be successful, that you're doing really well, that you start looking for help as a failure. So I never sought the help I should have done from my tutors and actually struggled quite a bit through there. There's also periods during my degree and the time beforehand that I don't actually remember much from. I think the struggle created kind of almost like a trauma response where my mind blanks sections of it out. There's still a lot of happiness there being part of the York St John Rounders team. We never managed to get into any league or play any competitive matches, but being part of that team, playing some exhibition matches, having that whole social aspect is a very happy memory. I still have the polo shirt from the 2003-2004 team. And then there's graduation, and everybody that was so close together in the city leaves, goes back home, goes to their new places, finds a job in another city. And I just kind of stumbled at that point into the part-time retail job I had becoming a full-time one. So I was working out of a sports shop on Davygate. I was on the supervisor and management ladder. I was doing well at that, and then questioned whether that was actually my path forward. This led to me jumping ship, going into a law firm in town and starting as an office junior, very kind of admin focused roles. But within 9 months, there was an opportunity where somebody was on leave and they just handed me this kind of social housing paralegal workload because they thought I would be good at it. No training, no experience, no qualifications, just suddenly jumping from doing the mail to looking after plot sales and the transfer of leases with just a bit of guidance from the person sat next to me. This kind of opened my eyes to the wider social aspect. It was social housing clients, so it was homes for older people. So if anybody's seen the Joseph Rowntree properties in New Earswick, I looked after a load of those and a lot of clients like that. But I had that role 2006 into 2008, and then the third of the 5 recessions I've lived through hit. And housing always suffers in a recession, social housing even more so. So I had to leave that role, moved back. My parents moved to another law firm in Bradford, but this time it was a recoveries role. And this, I think, is where I really found my identity and my purpose, but not in the best of ways. It was secured recovery, so it was mortgage work. And even though there was a drive at that point to rehabilitate debt rather than to take properties off of people, it was still a thing that happened. So working off hours, being on phone calls where people lost their homes was very hard work. And at that point, I knew I needed to be on the other side of social activity. So in 2009, I left and I started working at the job centre in Harrogate, so actively trying to find a way to get people back into work, to progress their lives, to build rather than taking away. It was still the back end of the recession workload. It was still more people becoming unemployed. So it was still hard work, but it was moving in the correct direction. Knowing that was a temporary position, having access to the full DWP systems, I was able to find a position, as Owen mentioned, with Inclusion Housing. It's a housing association that provides supported independent living to adults with additional needs. So it was a mix of the experience of social housing with Rollits alongside the drive to help people more directly. It's a very rewarding role. When I joined, I was the only member of the admin team, and it had 70 units. By the time I left, it was 3,500, and it was a team of 8. So it became my first experience of line management, a whole different skill set, a whole load of growth there. But the more important thing that happened during my time with Inclusion Housing was the introduction of GDPR in 2018, a whole new legal framework for data protection that covered the whole of Europe. We were in the EU at that point. And anybody that was working during that period remembers a mass panic in all organisations about what they had in place, how they were going to deal with the new legislation. Being somebody with a very methodical mindset and with experience of contracts and legal documents, I helped our data protection officer to work through that, to ensure we were compliant, to evidence it to our board of directors and make sure that the organisation was on a straight path. And that exposure to data protection was a revelation for me, because it's a way to use a methodical nature and pedantry to actually help other people. Data protection is born out of all the dark arts, secret societies that some national governments had at the back end of World War II. That's why Germany is one of the leaders in promoting data protection law. So it is very much based around supporting people's rights and freedoms. That then directly led to the opportunity with Family Fund, who I joined in 2019. They're the UK's largest charity providing grants to families raising disabled and seriously ill children. And they were looking for a new audit and compliance officer. Being able to demonstrate that I had experience with all that work meant I could move over, and it was just the right time because a growth of the funding, the workload, a greater understanding of what the workload is meant that the team over the next few years expanded. So from an officer, I became a manager. I took on, again, line management responsibilities. And just within the last year, become a head of department and have taken over governance as well, which means I also look after the team that works on behalf of the board of directors, providing briefing notes, setting up meetings, collating agendas and writing minutes, all the legwork associated with making sure a board runs smoothly. And Family Fund's been fantastic in also allowing me other opportunities to express my worldview, volunteering at our stand at Pride every year. I was an inclusion champion within the organisation and had a specialism in promoting understanding and inclusion of neurodiversity. We were invited to York University's and Aviva's On Track programme, which was aimed at helping students from non-traditional student backgrounds to understand the transition into the workplace and how to build networks within the work community. And as I mentioned this year, the possible highlight of my whole career, my compliance team being nominated for and then successfully winning the Small Compliance Team of the Year, Non-Financial Services, the International Compliance Awards. It's one thing believing that your team is the best in the world, but having an international panel of experts actually confirm it for you is fantastic, and seeing the effect of them is brilliant.
Brilliant. Thank you, Chris. What an excellent presentation and a brilliant run through of your life, touching on early childhood experiences through to secondary education, college, university, and then into the world of work, moving from what I'd sort of describe as a job to a kind of career with those pathways, plans, and unexpected opportunities. I made some notes as we were going, still very much paying attention to you in terms of some of the really interesting things that stood out there, the importance of engaging in those extracurricular activities and societies at university, and how even in that 1 year or so that you were at YSJ, you were able to make those connections there. And then also the cumulative effect of the various roles that you've had over time. You know, it's hard, I think, to talk about a single set of transferable skills. And I will ask you a question about what you took from education later. But just thinking about that journey towards the more recent successes, congratulations on becoming a head of department, and again on the award that your team received. What do you think are the key things that built up towards those successes? How, if you think about what you've achieved in the last year or so in those two aspects, what do you think were the key building blocks towards those?
I think it's being able to take the positive experiences and opportunities and the personal growth at each stage of your life and your career, and being able to line those up together. So I said at the sports store at first, I was on the management training program. So it's opening my eyes to understanding how businesses operate beyond the task in front of you. Then building in with Rollets, there's the social aspect, but also the understanding legal and contract documents. Continued through the work in Bradford, at the job centre, building in my knowledge of the kind of framework supporting people through the civil service, and then inclusion housing, putting some of that together already, but then building on learning how to line manage and putting that all together. And it's really the culmination of those, the learning the data protection law when GDPR came in, put that all together, and what's built from that is what's allowed me to succeed at Family Fund.
Brilliant. That was an excellent answer. I can see that methodical brain that you talked about, working through that there and really laying that out very nicely for us. The other thing that stood out to me that I thought was really powerful, poignant, I'm not sure what the word is, was you talked about that transition from that work that you kind of serendipitously picked up at the first law firm regarding the social housing, the fact that because of recession, external changes, we're not always in control of our fates and pathways because the world shifts underneath us and around us. So you then ended up in that role at the law firm in Bradford, and you had a very personal epiphany around that. And this kind of links to my first question, because I wanted to ask, how much of that do you think comes from just within you, or did you have people around you that gave you advice and support and said, look, if this is how where did that come from? How did you deal with that kind of epiphany moment that something had to shift?
I think the only person I really spoke to it about it was my partner at the time. I don't tend to talk about my work a lot to people outside of it. I tend to leave my job at the door in the most literal sense. We talked about it a bit, but really it was an internal realization. I talked about Star Trek, I talked about Doctor Who. They are very socially minded shows that are very clear on the kind of social contract that need to support other people. As an adult, I'm very much into The Good Place, and again that moral mindset of looking at the world, looking at other people, and knowing that you can't be selfish and have a society work, and looking at that whole construct of me, and then the work I was doing for that law firm, it really jarred. I wasn't happy in the work. It felt uncomfortable actually performing. I was really good at it, but there was no way I could be myself and do that role. And there was one really horrific experience with it I won't talk through here, but it was just a kind of mental full stop. It was very much, I'm done here. I can't do this anymore.
Okay. Yeah. So when something reaches that sort of crisis point that goes, okay, something's got to shift. But I would still say, I think it takes a sort of a boldness and a strength of character to then go, okay, and now I'm going to make the shift, right? And I'm going to find the thing that's having that confidence that you'll find that is pretty powerful. So let's talk about something more enjoyable then. What do you most enjoy about the work that you now do?
What I enjoy most is what a lot of people at Family Fund will say, and that is knowing the effect we're having and the purpose of the organisation. It's something across the charity sector as a whole. Family Fund, as well as providing grants to families, we do a lot of research on the situation. There's a cost of care report we produce every year. A couple of years ago, we reported on the increased cost of living for families raising autistic children. And so we know what the need is. We then know that whatever we do in the organisation, be it finance facilities, doing the grants, or the compliance side, we are all working towards that goal of helping where we can. And we get feedback from families. And so every single week we are seeing that we are having an effect on families' lives. And there's nothing that beats that. So when you get to the whole existential questions of why am I here? What is my purpose? What am I doing? Having a family raising disabled children say, actually, we were struggling, but this has really helped us. That is really powerful at setting yourself back on track.
So there's a strong, positive organizational culture that is something that you can gravitate around, a kind of collective understanding of that positive mission. But then also you talk about that it's almost a feedback loop, right? You've got a good sort of fairly not instantaneous, but fairly short feedback loop that you're hearing about the positive impact of your work and the value that that can give and the sense of purpose that gives. That's great. So staying on that, working in the charity sector, what advice would you give to a graduate who wants to work in the charity sector or for a nonprofit organization?
There's two things. The first of them is it's a bit of understanding about organizations. So I think there's a kind of thing to look, some people do looking at the title and thinking the industry and the work thinks the title. So you look at marketing, you work for a marketing firm, you look at finance, you work for an accountant. And the first important thing is to understand that's not the kind of organization charities are. We have people that do the charity work. Once you get to any organization that's even the high end of small organizations, 100, 150 staff, there is every type of work in there. We have a large finance team, we have a communications and marketing team, we have a fundraising team, facilities, HR, compliance, internal audit. So if you want to be able to work for a charity and provide that kind of positive difference in the world, it's not necessarily a case of going, I want to be a charity worker. It's understanding what you're good at and what skills you have, looking for that career and then finding that role inside of a charity. The second piece of advice is a bit of insider knowledge, and it's the drive at the moment for lived experience. So charities at all levels, from administrators up to trustees, are looking for an understanding of the people they're trying to help. So if you have lived experience of anything a charity works for, then focusing on those charities and communicating that lived experience is important. But if you want to get into charity work and you don't have that lived experience, look to volunteer at a charity, look to volunteer in some way to help a group that you're interested in, whether that's homeless shelters, volunteering to help run days for disabled children, anything like that, and getting that lived experience so you can understand the work the charity is doing, be able to communicate that, get inside it, and then use that experience is something that's valued a lot at the moment in the sector.
Right. Two really solid pieces of advice and guidance right there. And then I guess slicing through your who you work for and where you work and what you actually do, the second part is what about somebody or a graduate that's looking to gain experience in the governance and compliance space? What would be the key skills that somebody who's at university or coming towards the end of university might want to be focusing on to get into that kind of space?
So it's attention to detail, the ability to interpret a complex piece of information, something like a legal contract, a piece of legislation, and understand what the requirements are, and then to be able to communicate those to other people. The skill of communication is often undervalued within the compliance sector, but we need to make sure that everybody else in the organisation understands what the need is and buys into actually making that happen. So yeah, I often joke that I'm a professional pedant. It's that kind of understanding the detail, making it happen. It can be a hard thing to get into. And it's that kind of general advice of looking for additional opportunities whenever they present themselves within an organisation. If you have a large enough organisation, a large enough set of roles, there will be people within every department who make sure that workload is seen through. So within our grant processing department, we have administrators who do the little audit checks on all the files before passing the results up to our internal audit department to review. So if you can get yourself onto the audit checks within that department, that's the first step. And then often within organisations like we have in Family Fund at the moment, we have a lot of secondment opportunities, and it's understanding the value of those. They're not permanent. Usually they may not be a huge difference in salary, so you might not think they're worth it, but they really are for proving your adaptability and for learning something else about the organisation you're in. And the more you go up a ladder within an organisation, the more important a wider understanding of the organisation and the function of every department becomes. There's only so far you can go knowing just the department you're in.
That's really interesting, and it links back to our discussion around transferable skills earlier about how you build those up from different spaces. And I suppose as a student they can think about internships, but not only that, there's internal opportunities at York St John that they can take on and learn from. And then also a key thing that seems to really stand out is that you don't seem to have been afraid to take the opportunities that come, right? Whether it's a secondment or being handed a portfolio of social housing as a paralegal, those opportunities really, really make a difference. But that's not all you've done in terms of kind of professional development, is it? I understand you're currently undertaking a level 5 apprenticeship in departmental leadership. Would you mind telling us a little bit about that and what motivated you to take on a formal piece of professional development within your career at this remarkable time?
So yes, I'm taking the apprenticeship, and as well as just liking learning, there was a bit of gamesmanship to this particular piece. I'm quite a good person at looking at how the pieces in the office around me are moving and being able to predict the future of what's going to happen. So I saw the slight change of the department, the head of department role coming up, and I knew that doing this particular qualification, departmental leadership, would place me in a position where I had a better argument for myself being the person to take that role. But continuing professional development is something that's important generally. Between, I think it's 2013 and 2019, I had a new qualification every single year, just to make sure that I was always driving forward, always improving myself, always making sure that I was the best person I could be at the role I was in. It doesn't have to be anything like as frequent as that, but I think it's an important thing for students to realise that learning doesn't stop at university. It's something that benefits you whatever role you're in. It's a requirement of some roles. Working in the law profession, it's a requirement of any fee-earning legal role that you have professional development. You'll usually find the law firms have a 5 and 2 rule. You'll spend 5 hours a day working on tasks for clients and 2 on developing yourself.
Wow. Okay. And so some sectors, industries, professions build that in, but it's also recommended that students, graduates, professionals build that in themselves, right? And perhaps, as you say, not quite as continuous as you managed to achieve with almost a qualification every year, but still chipping away at those things is really, really valuable. And I think that links nicely because of, we've heard all about your journey, and you did a great job, as I said earlier, of really kind of profiling your life and how that led into your career and the weaving path that you've taken. But what advice would you give to someone, or a student, a graduate, who hasn't found their passion yet and haven't quite figured out what career they might want to take?
The very first piece of advice is the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy one of don't panic. There is a huge difference between how information and understanding of tasks and roles and opportunities exists within the working world to the student world. So within your degree, what the subject of the degree is well defined, what the topics of the modules and the classes are is well defined, but then it opens out to a whole new world of interweaving opportunities. And there are things that you might not cover in your degree. I don't remember ever seeing a degree in data protection or in charity commission compliance in any university. So I didn't know that opportunity existed until later in life. So you may not encounter the thing that really ignites you or that you feel passionate about or that you're really good at until a bit later on. For me, it was in my 30s. It may be anything up to that for you. It's life is a journey, and a point along that journey, you will encounter the thing that works for you. But that doesn't mean that all the bit up to that point is worthless or that you're not successful or anything. You can be successful, you can improve yourself, you can improve other people's lives, you can have a good income, develop a good life for yourself, and then have that success and then find the thing that you're passionate about and really succeed at later. It's just knowing that the more you expose yourself to opportunities, the better the chance you have of finding that.
Brilliant, brilliant. Right, I've got two more questions for you. And I think I know which one I'd like to finish on. So before I move on to that, York St John has probably, we'd hope, come a long way since you graduated, offering a whole range of support for students, both in terms of study skills, well-being, mental health, etc. However, there's always room for improvement. What support do you wish was available to you at university or would be available to students now to help them with the transition from that more structured experience of university to that much more convoluted and dynamic world of work?
I think what it is some of the things I've already seen. I mentioned the York University and Aviva on-track program, where there is that kind of guiding students to make connections with the business world. At Family Fund, we have had interns from both universities. And when I was at St John's, I knew there was a graduate support team. Again, with the toxic independence, the not seeking help, didn't speak to them, even though I really should have. So I think that the support is there. I think what we have now is a period of time, whenever anything is introduced, of it becoming mainstream and breaking down to the barriers of it being something that is every day for people to approach.
And building that approachability and the routinized nature of students engaging with graduate services, career services is really important. And I think the university, I can speak for the business school, we're doing some really active work on that right now. So finally, to wrap this up, I know you touched on a couple of beautiful memories of York St John, including the first day you visited in the sunlight and also playing on the Rounders team. But what would you say is your one favorite lasting memory of York St John, and that keeps you kind of connected as an alumni to the university?
I don't know if it necessarily keeps me connected as much as I'd like, but I remember Christmas of 2003, before I went home with my parents, just going and standing in the quad, the Christmas tree in the snow and the old buildings, and everything was just that picture postcard beautiful. And we'll know how traditionally terrible the centre of York Christmas tree is, and the one in the quad was just absolutely stunning. And it's just, I have a love of history. I'm a medieval reenactor, I have all sorts of weird hobbies, and just being there with history and tradition and the beauty of the whole thing and my love of York, and it was just, yeah, I can close my eyes and see it anytime I want, and I appreciate that greatly.
That is a beautiful memory, and I know exactly which quad you're talking about on campus. So hopefully, viewers, if you haven't seen that quad, you will come along to the campus and see that one day. And students, if you are currently studying with us, you will take a moment to visit that quad and save that memory for yourselves. So that brings us to the end of today's webinar. Thank you, Chris, for your time and your continued engagement with the York St. John alumni community. Thanks also to Louise and Amy from the alumni and fundraising team for all your hard work organizing this webinar. That's it from us for today. Thank you so much for listening, for watching, tuning in, and once again, thank you, Chris.